You're now listening to an archive episode of Or So I Thought, back when the podcast went by a different name. I really hope you enjoy it, and please make sure to listen to our new stuff. So, after you're done here, just scroll up, pick a new episode, and press play. By the mid-60s, the Beatles were already a worldwide sensation. They had plenty of what all musicians want. The 3 F's. Fame, fortune, and, well, you know the third one. Their stuff was great, and it was also popular. In fact, they were so confident in their quality and their popularity that it carried over to their creative process. Paul McCartney says about one of their studio sessions, John would be getting an extension built on his house or something, and the joke used to be, okay, today, let's write a swimming pool. In today's world, the relationship between what is good and what is marketable is a little bit more shaky. For those of you struggling to get your creativity noticed, you'll really enjoy this episode. My guest this week is someone who has an interesting perspective on the quality versus popularity dilemma. His name is Adam Westbrook.
I was one of those annoying kids who kind of always knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, and stuck with it from an early age. So, I mean, ever since must have been like 5 or 6, I've always wanted to work in television. And that was kind of my dream growing up, was to make TV shows, and that kind of morphed as I grew older into being a television journalist.
Adam is a video essayist. He's produced some of my favorite YouTube videos, and they're usually on history or on science. We'll talk about those shortly, but first, let's go back to his early years, because they set the scene for our discussion today.
Spent a lot of time at university sort of messing around in doing student radio and student TV, and then went and trained formally in broadcast journalism in London afterwards. And then I spent a few years working as a broadcast journalist in radio, actually, of all things, in different parts of the UK. But by then, this was just coming up to 10 years ago, things were starting to change. Certainly in that industry in ways that we're all too familiar with now. But the sort of jobs that I dreamed of doing as a kid sort of ceased to exist.
The jobs, as he said, were disappearing. But it wasn't merely economics that caused the turning point in his career. It was actually something else.
I had this little blog about the future of journalism, because that was what I was interested in, because I could see that the industry was going downhill. And I was just really interested in starting a new conversation about how does journalism adapt to the new technology that we have, and what does the future of news look like. And I remember I was working at a radio station, about to read the news. I was on a news reading shift, and I was about to go and read a live news bulletin to say it must have been 150,000 people or something like that. And I had a couple of minutes before going into the studio, so I'd written a blog post that morning on my Future of News blog, and I just logged in to just see if anyone had read it. And there were 3 comments that people had left, which doesn't sound like much, and it isn't many at all. But I remember that seeing that 3 people had read and responded to something I'd written excited me more than then going to read the news to 100,000 people. I think that was a moment for me when I realized actually I wanted to be independent and work online only.
That's it. The seed had been planted in Adam's head and in his heart. The internet made him feel more connected to the audience. It felt like more of a conversation than what radio broadcasting offered. So he left his secure job in radio to go freelance, all the while being all in on the internet. Here's the thing though. The internet is a jungle. There are less rules for creating, no gatekeepers to keep you out, but also very few curators to separate the wheat from the chaff. In the next section, we'll talk about those problems that arise for those of us trying to build a career in the arts or in business. Adam, now sure that he wants to use the internet as his platform, gets fast to work on creating. He tries ebooks, magazines, all types of projects. And guess what? None of them hit. That is, until he creates a 2-part online video, which you will hear him describe now. And those videos are what got him on my radar a few years back. The series is called The Long Game.
Yeah, it was. It's a very kind of autobiographical one in the sense because I was approaching 30 at the time, and had been going through a lot of those kind of emotions. Because by then, I mean, that was maybe my 4th year of being freelance, and I tried all sorts of things, or working independently online anyway. I tried all sorts of projects that hadn't really got off the ground. I'd published ebooks, and I'd did a little magazine, and tried kind of making videos, but in a very kind of stop-start and haphazard way. And I definitely by the end of 2012 was just kind of lost. I think just kind of feeling that I'd stalled. Meanwhile, I was watching everyone else, seem to zoom ahead. That's kind of one of the curses of our internet age, of course, is that you're always constantly surrounded by examples of people who appear through parallax to be, traveling further and faster than you. Which has its, which is depressing, isn't it?
Very depressing indeed. If you're not nodding in agreement, then let me pose a quick mental exercise. Think about something good that happened in your career. Maybe it was a new job you wanted, or a cool client, or a promotion, whatever. Okay, now, how fast does that feeling fade when you think of a friend or a college buddy, or even an ex who recently got their dream gig? That feeling in your stomach that you're feeling right now? That's the parallax effect. Okay. Now, back to Adam.
That year then, the start of 2013, I left London. I just kind of packed my bags and went to Paris for a bit just to get some kind of distance. I was only going to stay for a couple of weeks, but ended up staying for about 4 years in the end. But that really helped because I was just away from everything, and in a completely new world where I didn't even speak the language, and just had a year not off because I was still working. I was still doing freelance work, but I just kind of allowed myself to not care so much about my career, my career progress and what other people were doing and all that type of thing. And just sort of through that, I think I gave my brain maybe some space to think, I guess. But yeah, the thing that clicked everything into place was reading a book called Mastery by Robert Greene, which is mentioned in the videos. Some really great ideas in there. Apart from anything else, just that idea that the point of it all is the pursuit, not necessarily the achievement of, but the pursuit of mastery. That had a big impact on me, actually. And that just hit, bounced off with some other ideas I'd had. Certainly an idea that I sort of touched on the video, but never really got to kind of do properly, just was this idea that we always keep skipping over when we kind of do biographies of big achievers. We always skip over those kind of apprenticeship years, that's what Robert Greene would call them, I guess. We skip over them, and I kept seeing examples of that, reading about other people. Sort of so-and-so graduated at 21, at 38 they released their first album. And it's like, well, what's happened in those intervening 17 years? That's the really interesting time. I want to know, because that's where I am now. I want to know. And I just thought that was so fascinating, that there are always holes in the story that we don't tell.
Those intervening years, that is where you and I are right this moment. And this is important to know for when we discuss the central topic of this episode in a couple minutes. It's the disconnect between quality and popularity, and how this can be good news for us if we handle it properly.
And then, in terms of making it into a video and deciding to do it that way, the thing that really helped click actually just was the term video essay. wasn't something that I'd ever really heard of before. I think through Kirby Ferguson, who was sort of one of the big inspirations for me trying this style, with his excellent Everything is a Remix series, the term video essay, just calling it that, even if actually maybe it's even not technically in the eyes of most people, what I make is maybe not a video essay, just calling it that suddenly opened up the medium for me, because if I called what I was making a documentary, just my brain immediately locked down some kind of genre require obligations almost. So, okay, if I'm making a documentary, well then I guess I'll have to interview some people, and then I have to film some B-roll, and suddenly it's starting to just look like television again. And I hated that. But then suddenly I thought of it as being when I thought of it as being a video essay, something I didn't even really know what it looked like, I just kind of realized it was just, I could just, calling it allowed me to say, here's an idea I want to convey. How do I do it through the medium of video? And that just gave me personally the freedom I needed to imagine something that I'd never made before.
And this freedom to try things our way is something we will desperately need if we're going to survive through the lost years that we're going through right this instant. In the next section, we get down to the nitty-gritty: quality, popularity, goal setting, and putting food on the table. The lost years are tough, I tell you that. I know it, you know it. It's nothing new to anyone. And if we dig deeper, we find there is one major thing that happens somewhere towards the middle of these years that marks an inflection point. It's kind of what breaks the back of all those forces stacked against us. A magic potion, if you will. Adam is keen on what exactly this point was for him.
I think I just reached perhaps a kind of, like a maturity in my work that I hadn't had before, in the sense that when I started the project, it was, once again, me starting another project like the ebooks and the courses and the magazines that had all failed. At this time I said, no matter what happens, you're going to keep making videos for a year. You're excited about this idea, about exploring this concept. So no matter what happens, throughout the year of 2014, you're going to keep making these, and then you'll only review at the end of the year. That was the promise I'd made myself, and that actually ended up being really important, because you say, I released the video and it got great acclaim. Actually, that didn't happen straight away. I released both videos, and then another 2 months went by, and then it got noticed. But there was a time when there was this crucial period that I think everyone has when they start a public project like this, where I made one, I sweated over it, made it as good as I could, thought it was okay, or something I was proud of, released it to the world, and no one noticed. And because I'd made that promise, I just got up and I kept, I started making episode number 2. And all the while I was making episode number 2, there was the voice in the back of my head saying, dude, like 150 people watched the first one. Why are you even bothering? Like, this is such a waste of time. But because I made that promise, I finished it. And that went up. And then it was between that one and then the one I was making afterwards that it got noticed. And it was kind of worthwhile. But normally that would have killed me. Beforehand, that would have been like, right, this was a disaster. No one watched it. No one cares. I'm giving up and trying something else. But the promise to commit a year to it, regardless of the outcome, was, I think, the thing that made the difference.
Simple, dogged perseverance. This transformed his work and opened doors for him. When I hear this, it brings me back to the age-old quote that most of the work in the world is done by those who didn't feel like doing much to begin with, but did it anyways. There's a certain magic to finishing what you start. And that's really the leap that was missing for Adam. Make it as good as you can, finish it, ship it, and do it again. It sounds so very simple, but when we're in the trenches of the actual work, the first option on our minds is simply to give up. Adam's videos are now getting anywhere from 40,000 to 150,000 views each. And if you judge on quality alone, they actually should be getting millions. His stuff is just that good. Sadly, the world, the internet, doesn't always work that way.
That's the internet, though, isn't it? I think that's one of the hardest things about being a creator on the internet. Is actually there isn't a correlation between quality and success or popularity. It's much more complicated than that, which is kind of heartbreaking in lots of ways. It was a hard lesson for me to learn, but if you it's almost the thing that guarantees a video is going to be watched lots is that the channel itself has lots of subscribers. It's going to get to lots of people. And yes, if it's good or if it reaches people, it gets shared, and people share it among their friends maybe. To be honest, most of the traffic I think came from either through Vimeo, it becoming a staff pick on there, and then also it then being picked up by other publications. So, blogs and things doing a little article and linking to the videos. Interestingly, not necessarily organic, because we like to think that we kind of have this idea that, you make something and then people share it with their friends and they share it with their friends and this all happens naturally. It still kind of relies on this ecosystem. And the interesting thing, with the genre or the topics, I guess, that I pick, there isn't an ecosystem for them. There aren't popular blogs that, that love video essays about history, which is why it's interesting. You see the whole video essay thing has really kind of exploded in the last 2 or 3 years. But everyone, they're all analyses of films, and and it's smart in the sense because there is an ecosystem for those, right? You've got all the big film blogs, Film School Rejects, and the Slave Film blog, and all these kind of big websites that have big audiences that want content like this. And so if you make a video essay about films, analyzing films, that's kind of where the popularity comes from, if that makes sense. So it's a hard lesson, and it's tough to make something and care about it more than you need to, and then to find that doesn't correlate to reward, and that's in a sense what that realization is then what fed into the third long game video. The big message of that is that you've got to find a reward beyond the externalities. You've got to find the work itself rewarding, because you can't ever guarantee a reward from outside.
There's a word for this. Adam brings it up in the third part of the video, the long game. The word is autotelic. It means that something has a purpose of its own. It is done purely for its own sake, and not primarily as a means to an end. For example, many of us start going to the gym for the purpose of looking good at the beach, sure, why not? Or to be healthy. That motivation, though, wears off quickly for most. But I've noticed that those who stick to a workout regimen are actually those who enjoy the workout in itself. For me, it's become a time for clearing my mind of worries. No matter what's going on outside, inside the gym, just bliss. I'd like to pose this question to you now. Is the work you create autotelic? Remember the little story about the Beatles that I opened this episode with? For them, I'm sure they enjoyed their work, but money was becoming their motivator more and more. They earned all the spoils by getting through the lost years. In the meantime, the best measure of whether you can continue through the lost years is simply by finding the purpose within the work, not outside of it. Due to this disconnect between quality and popularity, the act of shipping the work becomes much more important than how good the work really is. Before you can shop, you've got to ship. As we return back to Adam, we see that he's made a breakthrough. He kept his commitment to himself, and things started moving. But this doesn't mean he wasn't fragile like the rest of us. At that point, he still let himself be influenced by outside pressure.
because I think that was still a sort of hangover from my journalism days, and the feeling that I had to make something, and I still feel this sometimes. I have to make something that's, that's got facts in it, because somehow facts justify its existence. Like, it's educational. That's why you should watch this. Partly because I was too scared, I think, to just make art for the sake of making art, because I felt like it was going to be pointless for people. To be honest, that's why I get asked sometimes, why have this whole thing called Delve? Why not just use your own name? And I realised actually ultimately that was also out of fear. Creating a channel with a name that wasn't mine, making it sound more official than it was a defense, because somehow, just going up on the internet and saying, "Hi everyone, I made this video about the history of bananas for absolutely no reason other than I wanted to. I hope you like it," is somehow the most terrifying thing you can do. Is just to say, "Hi, I made a thing. Here it is."
The feeling of vulnerability never fully goes away, but every creator has a point where the vulnerability doesn't stop them anymore. It simply drives them. And Adam's consistency keeps bringing him great opportunities. For example, Fusion, the sister channel of Univision, hired him to work his magic for their own programming.
I was being paid to make the things I was going to make anyway, for the most part. Otherwise, I, like many freelancers, I kind of pay for the bills in other ways, and client work is something I do a lot of, and I do struggle with it a bit. Client work is tough because especially if you're working with companies, you end up working with people who don't either don't understand or appreciate the medium in the same way. You're often working with marketers and whose specialism is print. And so they overanalyze the scripts and underanalyze the pictures, and there's all sorts of frustrations. I always find generally that I end up just kind of compromising and making something that I'm not that proud of. So yeah, that's why I've always loved doing these videos, is because they get to be my own kind of self-expression, 100% me.
This all has gotten him to a new approach to his career. It's one that on the surface may sound a bit indifferent and passive, but I think it actually shows a lot of maturity, with a little bit of mad genius mixed in there as well.
I have to admit, I'm probably a dreadful freelancer. I'm a really bad one, and it's a miracle I'm alive, really, because I don't pitch, I don't bid, I don't reach out to anyone. I'm just really lazy like that. And somehow I've never that's been the remarkable thing. I've never really needed to. It was difficult, certainly for the first few years. And I had I did a bit of teaching, and I did quite a lot of training, doing workshops, teaching other people how to do video. That kind of became the regular income. But certainly, when one project sort of is wrapping up, another one someone will get in touch, and there'll be another one. The downside with that is that you end up sometimes agreeing to projects that aren't right for you, and I've done that plenty of times, and it ends up being a difficult experience. As you'll know yourself, the mantra is always find what you love, find out what you love doing, and then find a way to make money from it. If I can do these video essays 100% of the time and still pay the bills, that's the goal, that's the dream. However, I was very lucky in that I got to do that for about 2 years with Fusion, and then the year afterwards. But what really surprised me was that that ended up not being a good thing. I found that I was erring towards ideas that I thought would be, that you might be popular and might get me more supporters on Patreon. I found that in trying to sort of build my followers on Patreon, I was, also damaging that kind of very special relationship between a creator on Patreon and a patron, which is sort of the gift part of it, which is I make something for them for free and then they give me money even though they don't need to. And yeah, I just kind of found that I wasn't feeling creatively inspired. The ideas were sort of leaving because it was just at a stage when sort of the videos were at their most popular. So I'm trying something different this year, which is I've taken on a steadier job. Moved back to the UK. It's not a full-time job, but it pays the bills, and it leaves me with 2 days a week to work on my video essays. But those 2 days a week are completely free to do what I want, and I feel because now the bills are paid, whatever, I don't, those essays don't have to be, good or successful, or popular or meet anyone's expectations, because there are places I really want to kind of take my work next that probably aren't really compatible with YouTube. It'd be really interesting to see what happens. But I just it just felt when I thought about it that way, when I realized those two things don't have to be related, then it kind of felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulder a little bit as well. I think often there's a kind of a perceived shame about having a normal job, and doing this type of work as a hobby on the side and that type of thing. But actually there is something very good about doing that, because it has to feel, if you want to make art and really pursue pure self-expression, which I think is what other reason to do any of this other than to dig inside yourself, find something amazing that you want to say, and in a way only you can say it, and say it, without any interference, and give it as a gift to the world. That's what the internet was. That's the gift of the internet that we're not embracing, because we're trying to figure out ways to use advertising to improve our CPMs and all that type of crap. I feel like we're missing a chance there. And so, I don't think it's bad at all to be someone who actively says, I'm going to support myself another way. Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote this great book called Big Magic, she puts it really well. She says, I work hard so that my creativity doesn't have to. And she says that she agreed to herself a long time ago that if she had to be a waitress into her 50s, then she would be a waitress into her 50s, just to make sure that the writing could happen without any interference.
It sounds paradoxical, but I keep hearing it more and more. Once an artist stops caring about how his work is received, then the work finally gets the freedom it needs to make waves. And that's just it. You and I are using the wrong metaphor when thinking about our process.
To think this way, to say, actually, my art is the main thing, but it's not a competition to the top. It's just a dedication to the path of making art. Then you're no longer climbing. You're just on your own personal winding journey to kind of self-expression. So it's a very different way of thinking about it. But yeah, it really takes the weight off your shoulders. It really does.
For me, maybe if I can continue to complete and ship my work, maybe if I stop letting the fear of how it will be judged slow me down, maybe that day, like the Beatles, I can find a connection between quality and popularity. And then maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to sit down and write myself a swimming pool.
All the world knows what I'm saying. All the world knows what I'm saying. The world will find, the world will find, the world will find.
The best place to keep in touch with everything I'm doing actually is on my Patreon page. The address for that is patreon.com/Adam Westbrook. Right now I am in the midst of producing a series of video essays. It's going to be a 6-part series. It's going to be released throughout 2017. It's a really ambitious thing that's beyond my abilities and a genre I've never tried before. and I'm really interested to see where it goes. But I'm doing lots of regular updates on that project, sharing scripts and ideas and behind the scenes stuff as I go along there. So if anyone likes my work and would love to support it, £2 a month would be fantastic, or even $1 a month would be great. So that's patreon.com/Adam Westbrook.
You've been listening to The Project Book. If you really enjoyed this episode or any other ones you've listened to, I ask you, would you mind going on iTunes and giving us a quick review? Even if you just write, I like it, I love it, Alex is the man. That would be more than enough. It would mean a lot to us. My name is Alex Cespedes. Thanks for listening.